My family turned their backs on me because I wanted to be baker, not a farmer like them. I stood in the middle of the kitchen with a bowl of dough in my hands, feeling like my entire life was about to fall apart, just like that pie I burned when I was 12. My name's James, I'm 18, and I grew up on a farm in a small town where everyone knows what freshly cut grass smells like, but nobody believes bread can change your life. It's one of those places where the weekend highlight is either a high school football game or watching old man Jenkins argue with the cashier at the general store about expired coupons. Our family farm has been around for 3 generations. My parents, Robert and Susan, are people of the land through and through. Dad's the type who can predict rain by how his left knee feels, and Mom can spot a sick cow from 100 yards. Every morning starts at 4:30 a.m., and every conversation eventually circles back to crop yields or equipment repairs. Dad always said, "Farming is stability, son. Those buns of yours are just childish games." Mom would nod along, adding, "Bread? Jamie, you'd be better off growing potatoes than dreaming about a bakery." And me? I dreamed about the smell of warm bread, about breaking off a piece of crust while it's still hot, about watching people's faces light up when they taste something that came from my own 2 hands. The only person who understands me is Grandma Mary. She lives 20 miles away in a village, in an old house with an oven that smells like stories. Her potato sourdough bread is pure magic, golden, with fluffy holes inside, and a crust that crackles when you squeeze it. I remember the first time she let me help her bake. I was maybe 7, covered in flour from head to toe, and she didn't even get mad. Instead, she laughed and said, "Add soul to the dough, Jamie." I nodded, clutching a piece of crust in my hands like it was treasure. After that, I biked to her place whenever I could escape farm chores. Dad thought I was just visiting, but Grandma and I had our secret. She was teaching me every trick she knew. How to feel when the dough is just right. How to know when the sourdough starter is happy. How bread talks to you if you listen closely enough. By the time I was 16, I could make a decent country loaf, though nowhere near Grandma's level. I'd practice at home when everyone was out hiding the evidence before they returned. The few times I got caught, I'd say I was just experimenting and endure the eye rolls. Grandma Mary is my biggest supporter. When I visit her now, we spend hours in her kitchen. She watches me knead and offers gentle corrections. "More water, Jamie. The dough knows when you're rushing." Her hands, wrinkled and spotted with age, move with surprising strength when she shows me how to shape a boule. She's given me her recipe book to borrow, handwritten, stained with flour and butter, with notes in the margins dating back decades. Some evenings I just sit and read it like a novel, tracing her handwriting and imagining all the people who've enjoyed her bread over the years. "You have the touch," she told me last month. "I've taught you everything I know. Now you need to learn from others too." The summer after junior year, I started researching culinary schools. I'd stay up late scrolling through programs on my phone, calculating costs, dreaming about moving to Chicago or New York, places where people actually appreciated artisan bread. Places where I could learn from real masters. One evening, I finally gathered my courage. We were sitting at dinner, everyone tired from a long day in the fields. I cleared my throat 3 times before the words came out. I don't want to bend my back on the farm forever. I want to bake bread. The silence that followed was heavier than our tractor. Dad first laughed, then turned red as a beat from our garden. "You're betraying everything we built," he barked, slamming his fist on the table hard enough to make the plates jump. Mom just sighed, looking at me with that disappointed expression I've known my whole life. "Jamie, culinary school is for rich kids, not for us." My younger sister, Kate, who's 14 going on 30, snorted. "What? You want to be that dude from the cupcake show with the fancy hat?" Everyone laughed, and I stood there feeling like an idiot, like my dreams had just been run over by our tractor. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the crickets outside and wondering if maybe they were right. Maybe I was being stupid. What did I know about the real world anyway? I'd barely left our county, let alone seen those big cities I dreamed about. But the next morning, while everyone was still asleep, I got up and made bread. Not just any bread. I pulled out all the stops. Rosemary and garlic sourdough, with a perfect ear from the scoring. It smelled so good that even our dog buddy came running, begging for a piece. I put it on the table before everyone sat down for breakfast, feeling proud and terrified at the same time. Dad frowned, poking at it suspiciously. "What's this, a chicken coop in bread form?" he asked, referring to the pattern on top from my scoring knife. Kate added, "Looks like you tried to bake a brick, but changed your mind halfway through." She picked up a piece anyway, tore it apart, and reluctantly admitted it wasn't terrible by shoving a second piece in her mouth. Mom tried it too, her expression softening for just a moment before her eyes darted to Dad. "It's nice, honey, but the farm doesn't run on bread," she said quietly. I laughed along with them, but inside, everything was boiling. They couldn't even give me this one thing. Couldn't even admit that maybe, just maybe, I had a talent for something that wasn't plowing fields or fixing fences. That afternoon, while everyone was busy with the hay baler breaking down for the third time that week, I filled out an application for a grant to culinary school. A long shot, sure, but Grandma always said, "You miss every shot you don't take." The rejection came in the mail 3 weeks later, like a slap in the face. I stood in the driveway, reading and rereading the letter until the words blurred together. "While we appreciate your passion, limited funds, many qualified applicants, encourage you to apply again next year." Dad saw me from the barn and came over, wiping his hands on his jeans. I didn't need to tell him what it was. He could read it on my face. He took the opportunity to drive his point home. "See? The world isn't waiting for your bread. Either commit to the farm or you're on your own." He didn't say it unkindly, which somehow made it worse. He actually believed he was doing me a favor, saving me from disappointment down the road. That night, I stood in my room, looking at an old photo of Grandma and me making star-shaped cookies, and thought, why do I have to choose between my dream and my family? I could hear them downstairs, talking about me like I wasn't even in the house. "He'll get over it," Dad said. "Remember when he wanted to be an astronaut?" "He's just confused," Mom replied. "College isn't for everyone anyway." Kate chimed in, "Can I have his room when he comes to his senses?" I felt like I was suffocating. Every corner of this house, this farm, this town suddenly seemed too small, too confining, too predetermined. Like my entire life had been mapped out before I was even born, and no one bothered to check if I wanted to follow that map. That night, I heard Grandma's voice in my head. "If the whole world is against you, follow your passion, Jamie." I realized it was time for something to change. But how? When I had $50 in my pocket, and everyone at home thought I was crazy. Could I really find the strength to leave everything behind for bread that nobody but me valued? Was I brave enough to walk away from generations of family legacy just because I preferred the smell of sourdough to the smell of hay? And if I did leave, where would I even go? As I fell asleep, one thought kept circling in my mind. Sometimes you have to break what everyone expects of you to become who you're meant to be, even if that makes you the family disappointment. Even if it means stepping into the complete unknown with nothing but a dream and a stubborn heart that refuses to give up on it. 2 weeks after my fight with Dad about my future, the unimaginable happened. The call came at 5 a.m., Mom's voice shaking as she woke me. Grandma Mary had a stroke. By the time we reached the hospital, she was gone. The funeral was small, just how she would have wanted it. The church smelled of lilies and old hymnals, and the pastor spoke about Grandma's kindness and community spirit. I sat between my parents, numb with grief, barely registering the words being spoken around me. After the service, we went to Grandma's house. The lawyer, Mr. Peterson, who'd known our family forever, read her will in the living room where Grandma had taught me to play checkers. Most of her modest savings went to charity. Her silverware to Mom. Her gardening tools to Dad. Then Mr. Peterson cleared his throat. "To my grandson James, I leave my house with all its contents, including my recipe books, with the hope that he will follow his heart and make bread that feeds the soul." The silence that followed was so thick you could have sliced it and made sandwiches. Dad's face went through at least 5 different expressions before settling on stunned disbelief. "She can't be serious," he finally said. He's barely 18. Mr. Peterson adjusted his glasses. Mary was of sound mind, Robert. The house is free and clear, no mortgage. Property taxes are paid through the year. It's all legal and binding. I couldn't believe it. I own a house. I own Grandma's house. Mom touched my arm gently. Jamie, honey, maybe we should sell it. Put the money toward your education later, after you've had some time on the farm. Dad nodded vigorously. That makes sense. We're putting money into new equipment for the farm this year. That's the priority. I looked around at the kitchen where I'd learned everything that mattered to me. The worn countertops where Grandma and I had shaped countless loaves. The old oven that didn't heat quite evenly, but somehow made the best bread I'd ever tasted. The window above the sink where she'd stand, humming and watching birds at the feeder. No, I said, surprised at myself at how firm my voice sounded. I'm not selling. Dad's face darkened. We're investing in the farm, and that's final. I stood up, feeling taller somehow. This isn't just a house, Dad. It's her soul. He grabbed his keys from the table. Then move here and live by yourself if you're so damn independent. Mom started to protest, but Dad was already halfway out the door. 3 days later, I packed a backpack with clothes, my $200 in savings, and Grandma's recipe notebooks. Mom cried at the door. Kate called me an idiot, but hugged me anyway. And Dad stayed in the barn, refusing to come out. As I drove away, watching the farmhouse shrink in my rearview mirror, I realized I had taken the first real step into adulthood. No safety net. No one telling me what to do. Just me and my decisions, for better or worse. At Grandma's house, my house now, everything was exactly as she'd left it. The worn table with knife marks from decades of use, the oven with crack running down one side, the smell of herbs hanging from the ceiling beams. I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by her recipe books, and suddenly felt the enormity of what had happened. Grandma was gone. I'd left home. I was alone in a house full of memories and possibilities, with no idea what to do next. I flipped through her notebooks, tracing her handwriting with my finger. Bread is not just food, it is love. I remember how we used to sit on the porch, eating fresh bread with butter, and she would say, "Life is like dough, Jamie. The important thing is not to be afraid to knead it." Looking at those faded pages, I made a decision. I would master her bread. I would find that magical taste I remembered from childhood. Maybe then I'd know what to do next. My first attempt was a disaster of biblical proportions. The dough actually rose so much it escaped the bowl, oozing across the counter like something from a horror movie. I stood there watching it, half terrified, half laughing, as it slowly consumed my kitchen. The second attempt went to the opposite extreme. I got distracted scrolling through baking videos online and didn't hear the timer. By the time I smelled smoke, the loaf was a charred brick that set off every smoke detector in the house. I had opened all the windows in the middle of January, shivering as I fanned smoke out with a dish towel. The third attempt seemed promising until Murphy, the neighborhood cat who'd adopted me, or I'd adopted him, depending on who you asked, jumped onto the counter and knocked over the bowl of carefully fermented sourdough starter. I chased him around the house with a wooden spoon, yelling, "You destroyed my dream," before collapsing on the kitchen floor in a fit of laughter that quickly turned to tears. Sitting there, covered in flour and cat hair, I wondered if Dad was right. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. Maybe I was just a farm kid playing pretend. That evening, Dad called. It was the first time I'd heard his voice since I'd left, and despite everything, my heart jumped when I saw his name on my phone. "The farm equipment delivery got delayed," he said after an awkward greeting, like we'd spoken yesterday. "Supplier says it's going to be another month." Translation: the money they would have used to help me wasn't being spent yet. Classic Dad, never able to just say what he really meant. "How's the old house holding up?" he continued, his voice carefully neutral. "It's fine," I said, looking around at the flour-dusted kitchen. "Needs some work, but it's solid." A pause. "We could still sell it, you know? Get you a fresh start somewhere." I felt my jaw tighten. "This isn't a shack, Dad. This is my life now." He sighed, and I could picture him pinching the bridge of his nose like he always did when frustrated. You can always come home, Jamie, before it's too late. Too late for what? I asked, but he'd already hung up. I stared at the phone, feeling a complex mix of anger, homesickness, and determination. I was truly on my own now. No money beyond my meager savings, no family support. Just me, an old oven, and Grandma's words guiding me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I got up around 3 a.m. and started going through Grandma's notebooks again, page by page, looking for anything that might help me find my way. In an old shoebox at the back of her bedroom closet, I found an envelope with my name on it. Inside was a bank card and a note in Grandma's handwriting. For when you need to rise, $5,000 to start your journey. Make bread that matters, Jamie. I sat on her bed, my bed now, and cried like I hadn't even at her funeral. Somehow, she'd known. She'd known I would need this lifeline, this vote of confidence, when everyone else had given up on me. With renewed purpose, I returned to her notebooks. Near the back of the oldest one, with a faded blue cover and water stains on the edges, I found a recipe marked, Special Potato Sourdough. My heart raced as I read the ingredients and instructions. This was it. The bread I remembered from my childhood visits. The one with the perfect crust that crackled when you squeezed it, with those large, irregular holes inside that held butter like little pools of gold. The recipe was more complex than anything I'd tried before. It required maintaining a potato-based starter for 7 days before even beginning the bread. It had cryptic notes in the margins. Listen to the dough on the third rise, and winter needs more time, summer less humidity. I traced Grandma's handwriting with my finger, feeling like I'd discovered a treasure map. Could this be it? The thing that would give me direction? The bread that might even, somehow, bridge the gap between the life my parents wanted for me and the one I wanted for myself? I gathered the ingredients that night, starting the potato starter according to her precise instructions. As I worked, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced since arriving at the house. This wasn't just about making bread anymore. It was about connecting with Grandma, about proving something to myself, and maybe, eventually, to my family. As I mixed water with potato flour and the tiny bit of old starter I'd found tucked in the back of her fridge, I wondered, would I be able to bring Grandma's bread back to life, or would I just burn down another kitchen trying? I covered the starter with a cloth like the recipe instructed and placed it in the warm spot by the window. Now all I could do was wait, hope, and somehow figure out what listen to the dough actually meant. By day 7, my potato starter was bubbling like a science experiment gone right. I'd been feeding it religiously, talking to it like it was a pet, and watching it grow stronger each day. Following Grandma's cryptic notes was like trying to decipher a code, but I was determined to crack it. That first real loaf came out of the oven looking decent. Not perfect, definitely not Grandma level, but edible. The crust had that golden brown color I remembered, and when I sliced into it, the crumb structure actually had those beautiful holes I'd been chasing. The taste was getting closer to tangy, complex, with that subtle potato undertone that made her bread special. After 2 more weeks of practice and about 15 more attempts, I felt ready to take the next step. My savings were dwindling fast, and Grandma's $5,000 wasn't going to last forever. I needed income, and more importantly, I needed to know if anyone besides me actually wanted this bread. The Spring Valley Farmers Market ran every Saturday, rain or shine. It wasn't huge, maybe 30 vendors selling everything from honey to handmade jewelry, but it had a steady crowd and, crucially, a pretty low entry fee for vendors. I called the market manager, a no-nonsense woman named Gloria, who'd apparently been running the place since the Nixon administration. "Bread, huh?" she said after I explained what I wanted to sell. "We've got a grocery store that brings day-olds. What makes yours special?" I launched into an explanation about sourdough fermentation and potato starters, but she cut me off. Save the science lesson. $25 for a 6-foot table. You bring your own setup. Cash only. 7 a.m. sharp for setup. No refunds if it rains. And just like that, I was in business. Sort of. My setup consisted of 2 planks of wood I found in Grandma's shed laid across 2 sawhorses, covered with a tablecloth Mom had given me when I moved out. I'd managed to bake 8 loaves, which seemed ambitious given my complete lack of customer base. I stood behind my makeshift table at the farmer's market, holding one of my loaves, thinking, if nobody buys anything, I'll eat it all myself and call it a victory. On one side of me was a cheese vendor with a professional-looking display and actual refrigeration. On the other side was a guy selling pumpkins and gourds even though it was spring, clearly operating on a "these have been in my barn all winter" business model. Both looked at me like I was an alien who had landed in their territory. My first customer was an elderly man with suspenders and a Korean War veteran cap. He squinted at my bread, picked up a loaf, squeezed it, which made me wince, and set it back down. "How much?" he demanded. $3, I said, having absolutely no idea if that was reasonable. He snorted. "Supermarket's cheaper." I smiled politely while internally panicking that I'd priced myself out of the market in the first 5 minutes. To my shock, he pulled out 3 singles anyway, took the bread, and walked away without another word. I had made my first sale. 1 down, 7 to go. The market crowd was slow that morning. A few people stopped, looked, and continued walking. One woman in a pink headscarf approached around 9 a.m., peering at my bread suspiciously. "What's in this bread?" she asked, poking one loaf. "Love and potatoes," I replied, immediately regretting my attempt at humor. She snorted. "Can't spread love on toast, young man." But she bought a loaf anyway, handing over the money with a grudging smile. By noon, I'd sold 3 more loaves. Not exactly a gangbuster's business, but not a complete failure either. Then a guy in a fishing hat took a sample piece I'd cut up, chewed thoughtfully, and declared, "My dog probably bakes better than this." I laughed along with him, but my hands were shaking slightly. Was my bread actually bad? Was I fooling myself thinking I could do this? He must have seen something in my face because his expression softened. "It's not terrible, kid, but it needs something. Have you tried herbs?" Before I could answer, he was gone, replaced by a middle-aged couple who debated for 5 full minutes before deciding against buying anything. That was when I noticed her. She was at the stall across from mine, selling bundles of herbs and flowers. Dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, dirt under her fingernails, laughing with customers in a way that made them all walk away with twice as much lavender as they probably needed. Throughout the morning, I kept catching her glancing over at my sad little bread stand. Once, our eyes met, and she quickly looked away, but not before I saw the hint of a smile. Around 2 p.m., when the market crowd had thinned almost nothing, she walked over. Up close, I could see the freckles across her nose and the spark of mischief in her eyes. "Your bread smells pretty good," she said, picking up my last loaf and examining it, "but it looks like something from a garage sale." I wasn't sure whether to be offended or amused. "Thanks, I think." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small bundle of herbs tied with twine. "Try adding these next time. Thyme, specifically. It'll make people stop and notice." "Why are you helping me?" I asked, genuinely curious. She shrugged. "The guy who had your spot before sold dream catchers made from his cat's fur. You're an improvement." Her name was Linda, and as we packed up our stalls, she told me she was also from a farming family. 3rd-generation lavender farmers, to be precise. "But you don't want to be a lavender farmer?" I guessed. She laughed. "I love the plants. I hate the family business politics. My dad thinks we should sell to big cosmetic companies. I think we should stay small and sustainable." It was like looking in a mirror, only with lavender instead of bread. "I'm James," I said, offer my hand. "I know. Gloria told me about the potato bread guy." By the end of pack-up, she'd somehow convinced me to invite her back to my place to see my setup. I didn't realize until we were driving there, her following my Honda in her ancient Toyota pickup, that my place was basically a shrine to my grandmother, and I hadn't had any visitors since moving in. "This was your grandmother's house?" she asked as we walked through the door, her eyes taking the floral curtains and the collection of ceramic chickens on the windowsill. She left it to me. I said, suddenly self-conscious, "I'm still figuring out what to do with it all." Linda nodded, running her fingers along the kitchen counter. My grandma had the same rooster clock. I swear all grandmothers shop at the same store. That evening, we flipped through Grandma's notebooks together. Linda was fascinated by the recipes, asking questions about techniques I'd never considered. Her knowledge of herbs added a dimension I hadn't thought about. "Look at this," I said, pointing to a note in the margin. "Field herbs plus starter equals soul of bread." Linda leaned closer. "Your grandma was onto something. Herbs change everything, not just flavor, but aroma, which is half a taste anyway." We stayed up until midnight, baking. The first loaf was a disaster. We got distracted talking about our shared love of 90s cartoons and forgot to score the top. It came out looking like it had exploded. The second attempt, though, we added thyme and a bit of rosemary to the dough, adjusting the hydration level to compensate for the additional ingredients. When it came out of the oven, the smell hit me like a memory. It was different from Grandma's original bread, but it had the same soul. I broke off a piece, steam still rising, and took a bite. Tears welled up in my eyes before I could stop them. The flavor was incredible, herby, complex, with that familiar tang from the sourdough. It wasn't exactly Grandma's bread, but it was possibly even better. "Are you crying over bread?" Linda asked, but her voice was gentle. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She broke off her own piece and tried it. Her eyes widened. "Okay, I get it now. This is amazing." We made 3 more loaves that night, experimenting with different herb combinations. By the time Linda left, we had a solid recipe and a plan for the next farmer's market. The following Saturday, I arrived with 15 loaves, 5 plain sourdough, 5 with thyme and rosemary, and 5 with a new lavender honey combination Linda had suggested. I'd also made a proper sign, James's Artisan Bread, written on a chalkboard I'd found in Grandma's attic. The difference was immediate. People were drawn to the display, which looked slightly less like a going-out-of-business sale, thanks to Linda's suggestion of using different height platforms covered in clean tea towels. But the real game-changer was the smell. I'd baked the loaves early that morning, and they were still slightly warm, releasing that intoxicating aroma of fresh bread and herbs. People literally followed their noses to my table. By 11 a.m., I had sold out completely. Several people asked if I had a business card or a way to pre-order for the next week. I scribbled my phone number on pieces of paper, feeling both elated and completely unprepared for success. Across the aisle, Linda gave me a thumbs up during a lull in her own sales. She came over. "Told you the herbs would work," she said with a grin. "I never doubted you," I replied, which was a blatant lie, but made her laugh. Over the next few weeks, a pattern developed. I'd bake increasingly larger batches for Saturday, and they'd sell out faster each time. Linda and I would experiment with new flavors during the week, and she'd slip me herbs from her family's farm for testing purposes. Word spread. People started coming to the market specifically for that herb bread guy. One woman drove from 3 towns over because her neighbor had brought her a loaf. A local bed and breakfast owner asked if I could supply them with bread for their weekend guests. I started baking at night too, sleeping in short bursts between rises and bakes. My hands developed calluses from kneading, and I had a permanent dusting of flour on all my clothes. But for the first time since Grandma died, I felt like I was on the right path. The limitations became obvious quickly, though. Grandma's old oven could only bake 2 loaves at a time. My hands could only shape so much dough. And the farmhouse kitchen, while charming, wasn't exactly designed for commercial baking. One Tuesday night, after I'd filled a special order for a local dinner party, Linda and I sat on the porch, drinking lemonade and watching fireflies appear in the gathering dusk. "You need a bigger operation," she said matter-of-factly. "You're turning away business every week." I sighed. "I know, but commercial ovens cost thousands. And I'd need a health department-approved kitchen, business licenses, insurance. It's too much." Linda was quiet for a moment, twirling her lemonade glass between her palms. "My Uncle Miguel has a pizza shop in town. He's closed on Mondays. Maybe he'd let you use his ovens 1 day a week to start." My heart raced at the possibility. "You think he would?" She shrugged. "He owes me. I helped him design his herb garden, and now all the local restaurants want his homegrown pizzas. Plus, she added with a mischievous smile, I know he has a thing for sourdough. The next morning, we visited Miguelito's Pizza. The place was small but immaculate, with 2 large deck ovens that made me immediately jealous. Miguel, a tall man with a salt and pepper goatee and Linda's same expressive eyes, listened to our proposal with his arms crossed. So you want to use my kitchen on my one day off, he said slowly after I'd explained. I nodded, trying not to look as desperate as I felt. And what do I get out of this arrangement? Before I could offer money I didn't really have, Linda jumped in. He'll supply your weekday bread baskets and help with pizza dough prep once a month. Miguel looked surprised and thoughtful. My customers have been asking for bread baskets, and my dough guy just moved to Cincinnati. We hashed out the details over espresso. I'd get the kitchen from 5 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Mondays. In exchange, I'd leave him 24 bread rolls and help with his monthly dough prep. I'd also pay for my own ingredients and a small utility fee. As we left, I turned to Linda, bewildered. How did you know he needed bread baskets and dough help? She winked. Sunday family dinners. He's been complaining for weeks. Walking back to our cars, a realization hit me. We could actually do this. Like, really do this. Linda bumped her shoulder against mine. Was there ever any doubt, bread boy? There had been, of course. Tons of doubt. Mountains of it. But standing there in the sunshine, with Linda beside me and the possibilities spreading out before us like rising dough, I could almost believe my crazy bread dreams weren't so crazy after all. The next Saturday at the market, people kept asking, "Where's that bread with the herbs? The one that smells like heaven." I realized we had created something special, something that was bringing joy to others, not just to me. I looked across at Linda, who was teaching a little girl how to smell lavender properly, and thought about how much had changed in just a few months. From the farm kid with a crazy dream to a guy with actual customers, a baking day at a real restaurant, and something that almost resembled a business plan. Could Linda and I turn this bread into something more than just a farmer's market hit? With her herb knowledge and my baking, could we create something truly special? And if we did, would it change everything for both of us? After our 3rd Monday baking at Miguel's Pizza Shop, Linda showed up with a tripod and a determined look on her face. I was elbow deep in dough, with flour coating practically every surface, including my eyebrows. "This has to go online," she announced, setting up her phone on the tripod. I laughed, assuming she was joking. Right, because people are dying to watch a guy punch dough for 3 hours. She didn't laugh back. Actually, yes. You have no idea how huge food content is right now, especially authentic, small batch stuff like this. I'd never been a social media guy. Back on the farm, my Instagram consisted mostly of sunset pics and the occasional shot of our cattle. I had no TikTok, no Twitter, and my Facebook was basically a digital ghost town I visited once a year on people's birthdays. Nobody wants to see me fumbling around the kitchen, I protested. Linda scrolled through her phone and thrust it in my face. On the screen was a video of a bearded guy making sourdough in his apartment kitchen. The view counter read 1.2 million. "People are obsessed with bread right now," she said. "And your story is better than this guy's. He's just some tech bro who got into sourdough during the pandemic. You're carrying on your grandmother's legacy." That got my attention. The idea of sharing grandma's bread with more people than just our local market customers was appealing. Plus, Linda had yet to steer me wrong. "Fine," I sighed, trying to wipe flour from my face and probably just making it worse. "What do I do?" "Just be yourself," Linda said, adjusting the camera angle. "Talk about why you're making bread. Show the process. People connect with stories, not just products." So I did. I awkwardly narrated as I shaped loaves, explained the special potato starter, and cracked a few jokes about Murphy the cat, who had become our unofficial mascot after his dough-destroying incident. I held the phone, filming the dough, thinking, if this doesn't work, I'll at least have a funny video to show my grandkids someday. When the bread came out of the oven, I did the usual listen to the crackle test, tapping the bottom of the loaf to demonstrate that hollow sound of a perfectly baked bread. We posted the video that evening, after brainstorming hashtags over pizza, courtesy of Miguel, who was quickly becoming both mentor and friend. Linda insisted we create a separate account for the bread business, rather than using my personal one. What do we call it? I asked. After rejecting at least 20 pun-heavy options, Linda was determined to incorporate loaf into everything. We landed on root bread. It worked on multiple levels: the root vegetables in the dough, the roots of the recipe in my grandmother's kitchen, my own roots in farming, and the idea of putting down new roots with this business. The first video got about 200 views overnight. Not exactly viral, but not nothing either. The comments were mostly positive, with a few people asking where they could buy the bread. Linda was undeterred by the modest response. "It's a start," she said when I showed her the numbers the next morning at the farmer's market. "Keep posting. Consistency is key." For the next 2 weeks, I documented everything: the early morning baking sessions, the market setup, even a time-lapse of the sourdough rising overnight. Some videos got a few hundred views. Others barely broke 50. Linda assured me this was normal, but I was starting to think maybe we weren't cut out for the social media game. Then one evening, after a particularly long baking day, I was too tired to script anything clever. I just sat down in Grandma's old kitchen chair, held up a fresh loaf of the herb sourdough, and spoke from the heart. "This bread is the smell of my childhood," I said, my voice a little rough from fatigue. "When my grandma would bake, and I believed anything was possible. She taught me that putting love into food isn't just a saying, it's an actual ingredient." I talked about how she'd left me her house and recipes, how I'd walked away from my family's expectations to follow this dream, and how sometimes the scariest decisions lead to exactly where you're supposed to be. It wasn't polished or particularly well lit, but it was honest. I almost didn't post it. It felt too personal, too raw. But Linda had gone home early with a migraine, and I didn't want to bother her, so I just hit upload and went to bed exhausted. My phone woke me up at 4 a.m., buzzing like an angry bee. At first, I thought it was my alarm, but then I realized it was notifications. Hundreds of them. The video had 10,000 views. While I slept, people across the country had been watching me talk about my grandmother's bread. The comments section was flooded. This made me miss my grandma so much. "Where can I buy this?" "I need it." This is what social media should be about: real people making real things. "This looks like the bread my Polish grandmother used to make." I sat in bed, stunned, scrolling through comment after comment. People were tagging friends, sharing the video, asking questions about the ingredients and process. Several had even looked up our farmer's market and were asking if we shipped nationwide. By the time I showed Linda later that morning, the view count had climbed to 15,000, and we had gained almost 1,000 followers overnight. "I told you," she exclaimed, nearly spilling her coffee in excitement. People connect with authenticity. This is just the beginning. She was right. Over the next few days, our follower count continued to climb. I kept posting more personal stories, more behind-the-scenes content of our baking process. When we hit 100,000 followers 3 weeks later, Linda brought a bottle of champagne to our Monday baking session, and we toasted with flour-covered hands. "We're in the game now," I said, still not quite believing it. The impact on our actual business was immediate and overwhelming. Our farmer's market table now had a line before we even finished setting up. We started taking pre-orders just to manage the demand, and even then, we sold out within an hour every Saturday. The local food co-op reached out about carrying our bread. Then a farm-to-table restaurant in the next town over. Miguel, seeing our success, offered us additional days in his kitchen. For a higher fee, of course, but still far less than what renting our own commercial space would cost. We were working around the clock. Linda had cut back her hours at her parents' farm to help me bake, and I was sleeping maybe 3 hours a night. But it was exhilarating. Each new order, each positive comment, each person who came back to tell us how much they loved the bread, it all validated the crazy decision I'd made to walk away from the farm. Then came the call that changed everything. I was up to my elbows in dough when my phone rang. Linda answered it for me, Then her eyes went wide. She mouthed Whole Foods and handed me the phone, helping wipe my hands clean enough to hold it. The regional buyer had seen our TikTok. She loved our story, loved the product concept, and wanted to discuss carrying root bread in their stores throughout the tri-state area. "Your bread is nostalgia in a loaf," she said. "It's exactly the kind of authentic, small producer story our customers connect with." I somehow maintained enough composure to set up a meeting for the following week. When I hung up, Linda and I stared at each other in disbelief before erupting into a flower-throwing, jumping up and down celebration that left Miguel's kitchen looking like it had been hit by a blizzard. "Is this really happening?" I asked, half expecting to wake up back in my bedroom at the farm. The whole bread adventure just an elaborate dream. "It's happening," Linda confirmed, her smile wide enough to split her face. "And it's just the beginning." News travels fast in small towns. By that evening, it seemed everyone knew about the Whole Foods call. The local paper wanted an interview. The Chamber of Commerce reached out about featuring us in their newsletter. Even a high school principal emailed to ask if I'd speak to the business class about entrepreneurship. I was riding high on a wave of validation and excitement when my phone rang again that night. Dad's name flashed on the screen. We hadn't spoken since that brief, tense call months ago. I'd sent a group text to the family when we hit 50,000 followers, but only Kate had responded with a surprised, "Holy crap, bread boy," and a thumbs-up emoji. I almost didn't answer. Part of me wanted to let him go to voicemail, to make him wait the way I'd been waiting for any sign of support from him. But curiosity won out. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Jamie," Dad said, his voice gruff but not angry. "Your mother and I saw the article in the Herald." The local paper had run a small feature on our social media success, complete with a photo of me and Linda at the farmer's market. "Yeah," I said, not sure what else to add. "Impressive numbers," he continued. "Didn't realize there was such a market for fancy bread." There was an awkward pause, and I realized he was waiting for me to say something. To thank him, maybe, for the closest thing to a compliment he'd given me in years. "It's been a lot of work," I said finally, "but it's going well." Another pause. I could hear him breathing. Could picture him sitting in his recliner, the one by the window that looked out over the east field. Phone pressed his ear, struggling with words that didn't come easily to him. "Maybe we underestimated your bread thing," he said at last. My heart jumped. Was this it? The moment of reconciliation I'd been both hoping for and dreading? But then he continued, "I've been thinking. The farm's got that old storage building we're not using. Good sturdy structure. With some work, it could be converted. You could move your operation there, be part of the family business after all." And there it was, not an apology or an admission that he'd been wrong to dismiss my dreams. Just a business proposition now that my hobby had proven profitable. "We could call it Thornfield Farm Bread," he went on, warming to his idea. "Expand the family brand. Your mother's excited about the idea. She misses you." I closed my eyes, feeling a complex swirl of emotions, disappointment, anger, but also a tug of homesickness I hadn't expected. "I appreciate the offer, Dad," I said carefully, "but this is my path, not yours. Root bread is its own thing." "Don't be hasty," he replied, a familiar edge creeping into his voice. "This is a chance to come home, be part of something bigger. The farm's your heritage, too. I know that, but so is Grandma's bread. This is the heritage I chose." My mother got on the phone then, her voice thick with emotion. "Jamie, honey, we just want you to come home. The house is so quiet without you, and we're proud of what you're doing. Really, we are." I felt my chest tighten. Mom had always been the peacemaker, caught between Dad's stubborn pride and my equally stubborn dreams. I knew she meant what she said. She was proud in her way. But I also knew that if I went back, if I folded root bread into the family farm, it would never truly be mine. "I miss you too, Mom," I said, and I meant it. But I need to see this through my way. After we hung up, I sat on Grandma's porch swing, watching fireflies blink in the gathering dusk. Part of me wanted to call Linda to tell her about the conversation. But another part needed to process it alone first. My phone buzzed with notification. Another 1,000 followers on TikTok. Another step toward the dream becoming reality. The next morning, Linda and I met at Miguel's to prep for our meeting with Whole Foods. We were creating a formal pitch, complete with our story, production capabilities, and growth strategy. Linda had even designed a logo, a stylized loaf of roots extending down, incorporating herbs and wheat in the design. "You okay?" she asked, noticing my distraction as I measured ingredients. "You seem off." I told her about the call with my parents, about Dad's proposition to bring root bread under the family farm umbrella. "Wow," she said when I finished. "What are you going to do?" "Keep going with our plan," I said firmly. "This is ours, not theirs." She nodded, but her expression was thoughtful. It's natural they'd want to be part of your success. Families are complicated. I knew she was right. Part of me understood where Dad was coming from. In his own way, he was trying to bridge the gap between us, to find a compromise. But another part of me was still hurt that it had taken external validation, social media fame and business interest, for him to take my dream seriously. As Linda and I worked side by side, planning the future of root bread, I found myself wondering, if we succeeded, if we opened our own bakery and built the brand I was envisioning, would I eventually be able to forgive my parents? Would the pain of their initial rejection fade in the light of what I'd accomplished? Or would there always be this gulf between us? The memory of standing in that kitchen, being told that my passion was just a childish hobby, not worth pursuing? I shaped the dough with perhaps more force than necessary, feeling the satisfying give under my palms. Whatever happened with my family, I knew one thing for certain. Root bread was becoming my life, my identity, my future. And for now, that would have to be enough. It's been 2 years since that first viral TikTok video. 2 years of 4 a.m. wake-ups. Flour covered everything, and more dough under my fingernails than I ever thought possible. 2 years that transformed a grieving grandson with a recipe book into the CEO of a company that grossed over $5 million last year. Sometimes I stand in front of our flagship bakery in downtown Millfield, holding Linda's hand, thinking. All of this started with Grandma's old oven and one crazy dream. The storefront, with its rustic wooden sign and the smell of fresh bread wafting onto the sidewalk, still feels surreal some mornings. We've opened 3 locations now. The first one replaced Miguel's Pizza when he decided to retire and offered us the space, with family discount, as he likes to remind us. The second opened near the university, where students line up for our special all-nighter loaf loaded with nuts and dark chocolate. The third sits proudly in the shopping district where the fancy folks buy their imported cheeses and aged wines. Whole Foods carries root bread in stores across 3 states, and Trader Joe's just signed a contract for our special potato dinner rolls. I sometimes remember Dad saying bread isn't a business, and can't help but smile at the irony. The business side has been a crash course in everything I never learned on the farm: profit margins, employee benefits, supply chain logistics. But the baking remains sacred. Every morning, in each location, we mix the potato starter exactly how Grandma taught me. Every baker who joins our team learns to listen to the dough, technique, before they ever touch an oven. Linda oversees our herb program, working with local farmers, including her parents, who finally embrace her vision, to ensure consistent quality in the thyme, rosemary, and other botanicals that give our bread its distinctive character. Last spring, I asked Linda to marry me in Grandma's garden. Our garden now, flourishing with herbs and flowers that supply both our bakeries and our home kitchen. We transformed the old farmhouse, updating the plumbing and adding a test kitchen, but kept Grandma's old oven as a reminder where it all began. Our wedding happened there too, under an arbor bill from reclaimed wood from Grandma's old shed. Guests ate root bread sandwiches and cake made with our sourdough culture. Looking around at our friends, employees, and families gathered together, I thought, Grandma would be so proud. During our first dance, Linda whispered in my ear, "You know, you didn't just need dough, you needed us together too." Cheesy? Absolutely, but also perfectly us. The most surprising turn came 3 months after the wedding. I was in the main bakery, teaching a new batch of employees our signature scoring technique. When I looked up and saw my father standing awkwardly by the counter, hat in his hands. The farm had fallen on hard times. Climate change had brought unpredictable weather patterns, and corporate agriculture was squeezing out family operations all over the county. Dad had been too proud to call, but Mom finally convinced him to come see me. "I was wrong, Jamie," he said, eyes fixed somewhere around my flour-covered apron rather than meeting my gaze. "About the bread, about your dream." Mom added, standing beside him, "We want to be part of this, if you'll let us." I could have gloated, could have reminded him of all those dismissive comments, all those times he called my passion childish. But looking at him standing there, older, somehow smaller than the towering figure of my childhood, I just couldn't. "You can join," I said, "but it's my bread, my rules." They both nodded, relief washing over their faces. Dad started handling our deliveries, his knowledge of rural routes proving invaluable as we expanded to more remote locations. Mom, it turned out, had a knack for customer service, her warm farm wife charm making every patron feel like family. Even Kate got involved, managing our social media after graduating from college with a marketing degree. "Who knew your weird bread obsession would pay my student loans?" she joked during her first week. "I don't hold grudges anymore. Life's too short, and success is the best revenge anyway. Besides, having my family as part root bread has brought a wholeness I didn't know I was missing. They bring their own flavors to the business, just like herbs in the dough. On the wall of our largest bakery hangs Grandma's portrait, with her words painted below, "Add soul to the dough." It's our company motto, printed on every bag, embroidered on every apron. I teach all our young bakers the same lesson. Dream, even when the world laughs. Some of them come from backgrounds like mine, small towns, limited horizons, people telling them to be practical. I make sure they know that practical doesn't always mean predictable. Sometimes, late at night after everyone's gone home, I'll touch the old oven we keep in the corner of our flagship store, Grandma's oven, carefully moved from her house when we renovated it into our corporate office. I'll whisper, "Thank you, Grandma," and swear I can feel her presence in the warmth still radiating from the metal. I've proven that bread isn't just food. It's life. It's connection. It's the past and future baked together. My roots are in every slice, every crumb, every smile when someone tastes that first bite of something made with love and history. If Grandma could see us now, the bakeries, the family reunited, the lives changed through something as simple as potato sourdough, what would she say? I think she'd just smile that knowing smile of hers, the one that always told me she could see further down the road than I could. She'd probably run her fingers over a fresh loaf, listen to the crust crackle, and say what she always said, "See, Jamie, the dough knows." And she'd be right. The dough knows. Life knows. Sometimes you have to trust the process, even when it gets messy or takes unexpected turns. Sometimes the most important ingredient isn't listed in any recipe book. Sometimes, to make something truly special, you have to break what everyone expects of you and become who you're meant to be, even if that makes you the family disappointment. Even if it means stepping into complete unknown with nothing but a recipe book and a stubborn dream. Because sometimes, that's exactly where you'll rise.